to Vitality Made Simple, the podcast that equips you to feel better, look better, and to enjoy the better relationships in your life. Life is all about relationships, and relationships are much easier when you feel great. So we're going to help you do that today. I'm Dr. Debbie Osment, your host, and thank you so much for being with us. Dr. Laura Miles is our guest today. She is a longtime friend and colleague of mine. Now, Dr. Miles is the person who inspired me to pursue functional medicine training. And she was actually the first board certified doctor in Oklahoma. So you can imagine how brave she is, how curious she is. And, her experience is unparalleled. So welcome, Dr. Laura.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, my listeners are people who want to not only make a positive difference, to use their gifts in the world, but, we all just want to run and play more. And that takes a lot of energy. And I know that you're going to help everybody have more energy today. You have launched an incredible self-paced online course entitled Functional Labs Decoded. Now, this is something that's really been missing in the online world. You've really hit a nerve here. People spend lots and lots of money, lots and lots of time taking lab tests in pursuit of being able to run and play more, but they often don't get the answers that they want. They get pages of tests back and they don't know what they mean. So, tell us what inspired this course and what the most common mistake that's made by physicians when it comes to interpreting labs.
Well, I think the thing that really inspired me the most were actually my patients, because they would come in with all these labs that their primary care had done. And often, they were told, oh, you're normal. And I'd take one look at them and go, well, this is low, this is low, this is on the border. No wonder you're tired. And that was before I even did any extra labs or in-depth labs. So I started realizing, I think the number one things that I was seeing out of traditional physicians is that they would get a lab and they go, oh, you're in normal range, so you're okay. But normal's not optimal. And I always work on optimization. And a patient of mine years ago said, gosh, I wish everyone could experience doing labs and doing things with a functional approach. And it got to me thinking, I was like, well, I teach my patients how to do this on a daily basis. Why couldn't I actually expand that and teach everyone, not just my patients? So that's when the idea for the course started.
So most physicians need this course. In fact, I think
I agree.
if you love your doctor, gift him with this course, or if you have somebody in your family, because I learned so much from it, Dr. Laura. I mean, it's just great. So, module 1 does such an incredible job of helping people make a timeline. Help us understand, the importance of that, because I think what you've hit here is helping people identify symptoms that would be ignored.
Right.
Their regular doctor might say, "Oh, you have anxiety," but you found out differently here. So, what did people learn on their timeline?
Well, so everyone, kind of has a tendency, especially when they're doing kind of like self-paced, they think, oh, I already know my history. But when somebody comes in with me and I spend an hour actually going over their history, more often than not, we discover a starting point of when things started happening. And when we can pin that down or start pushing things together, that's when we can start building a case of, oh, we need to go look here, we need to go look there. And so my idea of doing the timeline and the very first module is basically going through an entire history, not ignoring the things that you've had forever, because people will go, oh, I don't have any stool issues if you check it on a questionnaire. But when you talk to them, they go like, well, I have diarrhea 3 times a week. Well, that's not okay. So just because that's something they've lived with for 20 years doesn't mean it's okay. So the timeline and the history become one of the most critical pieces. And also in looking at this, there's so often that people will do all of their history and everything, and they go see their primary care doctor who spends 10 minutes with them, which means they're listening for two, and they want to go through this huge timeline of things that may not be really that important. So it's about trying to help you figure out what is important so you
Mhm.
can actually present the key pieces of information to your physician to get the most out of that appointment. So it's kind of a twofold thing. And in the course, what it does is that, if you have a symptom, let's say your fingers swell in the morning, and then by the afternoon they're fine, rings are tight in the morning, and then in the afternoon they're not. To me, that signifies something. It's telling me, oh, your gut may not be healthy. We need to go look at food sensitivities. And I actually walk people through not only what the symptoms could be, but what I'm thinking. Where would you go look next? So that way, when you're doing it yourself, you'll know, oh, I never even thought I had gut issues because I don't have any loose stools or bloating or anything like that, but my fingers are swollen. Maybe I still need to go do the gut module. So that's kind of what I was looking for in trying to teach people how to pay attention to their symptoms and their timeline.
Well, I think it's so good the questions you ask in module 1. There are a lot of things in
Mhm.
there that, as you said, people think are normal,
Right.
and or they think that it's in their family, so there's nothing they can do about
Hmm.
it. But you make it clear, no, this matters, and there is something we can do about it. And
Right.
then you help people distill, like you were saying, down to, what is their issue? Where are all these symptoms pointing?
Hmm.
Because then they can be a better patient. But as
Right.
the course goes on, folks, it's Dr. Lori gives you, great things you can do. I mean, it's very, very useful in terms of educating the regular person about what matters and
Right.
and what doesn't matter really. So in module 2, Dr. Laura, you talk about blood work. So in
Hmm.
your experience, what are some of the most easily dismissed clues on blood test?
Well, I think there's actually a lot, and it goes back to normal's not optimal. But, specifically the ones I really highlighted were looking at thyroid. And I go in depth on teaching you not only how to look at TSH, which is what most physicians order, but go deeper, looking at the T3 and T4, which are the two thyroid hormones that get produced that we can measure the most easily, and really understanding we want them in the middle, not off to the side and cattywampus and that kind of stuff. So I go into a deep dive with that because I think it's probably one of the most misinterpreted labs done in traditional medicine and by endocrinologists, not just traditional doctors. Endocrinologists have a
Yeah.
tendency to not even believe in T3. Some do, but most don't. Okay. The other ones I really highlight are looking at some nutrients because those are easily fixed and you can do this yourself. I even give guidelines of if it's this
Mhm.
low, this is how much you need. And I give names of products so that way you can have a clue of what I would consider a very good product. So I look at vitamin B as in boy, vitamin D as in dog, ferritin, which is iron storage, and just kind of really spell it out. And then also in that module, I give you kind of a snippet of looking at other labs, autoimmune labs, inflammation, which is so, so key and very often missed because no one's checking it. Also, just kind of some basic introduction information on how to read your basic metabolic panel or a blood count. So that way you have an idea when you get your labs of what to not to worry about because there's a lot of stuff on there that if it's a little bit out of range, it's really not a concern, but there's plenty of information on there that you're like, ooh, red flag, where do I go next? So we do a really deep dive in that module on all things blood work.
No, I love the area about nutrients. I think
Mhm.
people would save the money on buying trashy nutrients because
Right.
you've vetted what is actually medical grade, which is actually clean. And when people don't feel good, they'll just buy anything.
Right.
So they're just so vulnerable. And so I appreciate how you give people guidelines on, how much they need, because they're probably their regular physicians don't really know that information.
Oh, you're right. So many times people will come in and their doctor has correctly said you have a low vitamin D. So if you have a vitamin D that's actually below the reference range, and they say, well, just take 1,000 units a day, you're never going to get there. You will never get there. And a lot of traditional doctors don't understand the dosing, and they go like, ooh, these are really high doses, or they'll give that 50,000 prescription pill, which is actually D2. And we are really not created to absorb D2 very well. So we're handicapping our progress there. And they'll say, well, take it for 6 weeks and then you're done. No, you're not. You're not done. What happened? Why are you D deficient in the first place? And do you think when you just fill it up and you stop it, it's not going to go right back down? Because it is. So it's about figuring out how to plug in those things and be consistent and remeasure to see where you are. It's not a one and done thing. So the nutrients become extraordinarily important, and that's something you can do yourself. Now, you do need a little bit of guidance on some things, you need a little bit of follow up, but it is definitely something that's very doable.
Well, and people know how they feel. I mean, you talk about that in the course too. You can expect to feel better. If this is working for you, you'll
Mhm.
know yourself. I mean, people are so
Right.
often their own best doctor, really, unless they have somebody who's super tuned in.
Yeah.
And of course, we live in this busy world where so many people are stressed. I was so glad that you included adrenal health in
Hmm.
module 3. I mean, is there anybody out there listening who's a little bit stressed? Help us
Right.
understand what to look for when it comes to keeping our adrenal glands healthy, and to know when we're sort of on the edge of falling off the cliff of adrenal fatigue.
Well, I think you actually just hit on it. How many people are not stressed? I think that's like the I can hand, one handful of people right there. Everyone else is a different degree of stress.
Yeah.
And I think if you're really have been blowing and going and burn the candle at both ends over time, that's when the adrenal issues really become more and more pronounced. And it gets missed because adrenal fatigue, as the functional world calls it, doesn't exist in traditional world. It's only adrenal failure or Cushing syndromes, which is adrenal overproduction. There's this big gap in between. And even though it may not be technically adrenal fatigue, the adrenals are involved because they're your fight or flight gland. So they get you going, they help you get motivated, and they help you do things. So if you're starting to have especially afternoon fatigue, that's kind of one of the classic adrenal symptoms. Is you wake up in the morning, but then the afternoon you're just hitting a wall. Especially around 3 to 5 p.m. Those are almost always adrenal issues. And then as it progresses, the fatigue gets more and more and more severe to where you can be tired all day long. You wake up exhausted, even though you sleep for 12 hours, you can still be tired in the morning. And it just progresses into having more and more symptoms. So in this module, I show you how to really look at the traditional labs that, may get ordered for the traditional physician. But in addition, going into that in between gray area of the adrenal fatigue, which are salivary labs, and looking a little deeper in that. And knowing where you are can also help plug in specific supplements that may help you during those periods of time, because you can actually address that. And when I started my functional medicine journey, it was actually adrenal fatigue and nutrient deficiencies that just bottomed me out. And all my labs were normal. And when I started looking at, some of these specialty things that as a physician, I didn't even know existed, that's when light bulbs started coming off. My energy came back, my libido came back, everything came back to where I was functioning back, 100%. And the adrenals were the one of the biggest parts. So I wanted to dedicate a whole module to just the adrenals.
No, I think everybody needs that, because people don't know what to do.
Mhm.
And I think your course gives a lot of emotional solace to people because it's like, oh gosh, if she would ask that question or talk about that, then I'm not so weird. You know, it
Yeah.
can be so isolating when people are, say, needing a nap at 4 o'clock or not even being able to function. A lot of young mothers are just so exhausted because they're, burning the candle at both ends and they think they should be able to. So I think you helped him understand, okay, you're not weird and
Yeah.
here's how to feel good. Now in module 4, you talk
Well, real quick, Debbie. So
yes.
one thing about the mothers I wanted to point out is that so often young mothers are told, well, you have small kids. Of course you should be tired. But no, I mean, there's obvious times, yes, you're going to be tired if the kids were up all night and that kind of stuff, but it's a general rule they really shouldn't be. And they may not be like up there 100%, but you should be able to get through the day without being completely exhausted, very short fused because you're so tired and remembering some things. And that group of ladies just kind of get, well, you're okay. You're just a mom. You're just busy. Well, there's ways to support you when being a mom and just busy. So sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to
No,
make sure to
no,
point that out.
that is a great point. Thank you for that. And another thing I'm seeing with these young women is brain fog.
Oh yeah. Oh
Oh
yeah.
my goodness. I don't think we even talked about brain fog 10 years ago in life. I mean, but now it's just far too common. And I totally agree. I mean, when our children were little, I had plenty of energy. I mean, I was working 3 days a week and, it just, we need to, energy is really what
Yeah.
we're designed for at that stage of life when we're young. People are more tired at younger ages now.
Hmm.
The
I
world is
agree.
more
I
complicated.
agree. I agree.
Well, and you and I bonded sort of over gut health, really inflammation,
Yes.
12 years ago. We knew each other before that, but in module 4, you do a really beautiful job of talking about the gut, and you also acknowledge that the mouth is attached to the body as part of the gut. So, so what testing do you recommend for people um, to learn more about how to get their guts healthier?
Well, there are so many amazing tests out there. And this is an area that's hugely overlooked in all realms of medicine, including the GI doctor world. They go in and scope you and they go, oh, well, you're fine. But yet you're bloated or you have loose stools or, you eat and you just feel full suddenly. You have reflux. All of those symptoms have a cause. So now you have to figure out, where do I go look? And in the course, I actually try to guide you. Well, if you're having bloating after every meal, then you need to go looking down a small bowel overgrowth route. Versus if you're having bloating intermittently, then you might go down a food sensitivity route. So in the module, we talk about food sensitivities, we talk about small bowel overgrowth, yeast overgrowth, and then you and I's favorite test is a comprehensive stool analysis, and why that is so different than the stool analysis your regular doctor did, because this actually goes into the microbiome.
Mhm.
And traditional labs in stools only look for a specific bug that I order it to look for. So I said, I need you to look for E. coli. Well, then I'll look for E. coli. It doesn't say, oh, these are the bacteria in your gut, and these are a little overgrown, and these are a little underrepresented. So you need to replenish with this. It doesn't tell you that information. So we walk through all of some of the very, very specific type of gut tests that you can do. And I mean, see, I could have gone just built a whole course based on the gut. I love the gut so much. I think it's so important. And I know this is one of your favorite places too. And I love that you mentioned the mouthpiece also, because I think one of my favorite things is that when I see this inflammation and I know it's there and I know it's all connected, and it's like, okay, I did the food sensitivities. That was okay. We cleared that. We worked on the gut microbiome. We cleared that, but yet we're still having this inflammation. Then I go, okay, let's go see Dr. Debbie, because I bet you she's going to find something in the mouth. And you always do. You always do. So there's an abscess, a cavitation, something growing under the gums. It becomes that important. And I actually hope to expand that module more and actually start talking about some of the oral DNA testing. That is so very important. I think I mentioned it, but I didn't go into it too deeply. But it's also important. And I think that the more we can understand the gut, the better we're going to be. We're actually starting to see traditional medicine come up with research on the gut microbiome and using it as tools of identifying, oh, maybe the gut microbiome is off in obesity, maybe it's off in
Mm.
diabetes, and maybe it's off in cancer. We're starting to really see some exciting literature coming out that it's going to take a while for it to really hit mainstream as far as what to do about it in their world, but we're already working on it in the functional world.
Oh, it's so exciting. I love Fusobacterium nucleatum, this oral bacteria that translocates to the gut. And as you know, I've had cases where a patient was undergoing chemotherapy with 5-fluorouracil, and in my research uncovered that Fusobacterium makes the cancer cells immune to resistant to the chemotherapy. And actually, the latest research, Laura, is that cisplatin is also ineffective if Fusobacterium is present. So
Wow.
when we start tying these things together, I mean, you're the one that got the party started. Then, oh my gosh, people like this patient called me and he said my chemo is working now, and it was a simple solution, and that's what's so
Right.
empowering about your functional labs decoded is that this helps people understand their own bodies and take responsibility in terms of learning about them and being able to ask good questions that will
Right.
potentially save their life. I mean, we want to
Right.
have fun and run and play, but so much of what you do comes down to life and death. It really does. So
Can.
it's
It
huge.
can.
It's just huge. Now I haven't started module 5 yet in your course.
Yeah.
You talk about mold.
It's
So,
mold.
oh my goodness, tell us about mold.
Mold gets missed mainly because no one believes really in it. They like, oh, you have mold in your house, but they don't realize that you can actually, it's in your body too. And mold is so tricky because you can have 10 people all in the same room that is mold infested, and only one of them might have symptoms. So they kind of get dismissed of, oh, you have something else going on. And even trickier is that you could have been exposed to mold 10 years ago and just have these low lying symptoms that just kind of start escalating 10 years later. And it's all because of the mold. I think mold triggers a lot of inflammatory responses, it triggers a lot of histamine responses. And so, a lot of my mast cell people who have a mast cell condition is basically when the cells that produce histamine just dump histamine all the time. Okay. They are triggered because of mold. They're triggered from other things too, infections and that kind of stuff. But I even touch on mast cell in one of the modules in the gut area. But mold is really one of the biggest triggers for that. And you can't go anywhere without really thinking that mold could be a part of it. And so you can actually measure for mold toxins in your body. And then there's whole protocols to be able to pull them out and try to start turning them around. And I see young people, it doesn't matter. It doesn't discriminate against the age of who it affects. And weird brain fog is probably one of the most common symptoms of mold. Now, brain fog, you have to look at all the other things. I don't always start with mold, but I've had several college kids end up in these dorms that are, ancient and they have full of mold, and they just go downhill, become extraordinarily fatigued, and you're working everything else up. And at the end of the day, you have to step back and go, oh, could it be mold? And then you start working on pulling that out. So, mold is a really, really important thing to think about that traditional medicine doesn't even really acknowledge.
Wow, it's so baseline, it sounds like. So is
Mhm.
mold more the genetic tendency, or the rain barrel effect, just more toxins building up, or maybe both, Laura? That's a poorly worded
Well, I
question.
think I think genetics can play a role in a lot of things. And they're actually starting to think that there are genetic predispositions to mold, being susceptible to mold, being susceptible to autoimmune conditions. I mean, there's obviously specific genetic things for some specific ones, but there are some predispositions. Just because you have the genetic predisposition doesn't mean you're going to have a problem. Okay. It just makes it maybe you're more susceptible to it. And you don't even have to have a genetic predisposition to have a problem with mold. So, I mean, there are some genetic tests you can do. I usually don't even go that route because at the end of the day, you need to just go and treat things the way you do, and then move forward from there.
So, through your course, tell how people can access tests that maybe their physician indeed doesn't know exist.
Well, so I had a lot of patients before I did this little course for breast implant illness. And a lot of my patients were actually all over the US, actually all over the world. And so I realized that they were asking, they said, well, how do we get these tests? And so I found a way that if you're in the United States, with the exception of a few states that have their own regulations, you can actually order these tests through the portal. Now, a lot of the blood tests will be covered by your insurance. So I actually give you my starting workup list that you can go and ask your primary care doctor to do. But the specialty tests like the stool analysis or the food sensitivity or adrenal testing, mold testing, and, those type of things. How about the cholesterol, the very in-depth cholesterol panel? You can get all of that through the portal just by logging in. And when you have purchased the course, then you can actually order that. The results come directly to you, and the information is in the course on how to interpret those results. And then also during the course, I'm going to actually have a kind of a live Q&A. So if you're stumped and you have a very specific question about a lab that you really don't understand, then we're going to be able to at least dive into helping you understand that.
This course will save people so much time. It will just,
That's the hope. Yeah.
yeah, no, it really will. And it will give them peace of mind too, to know their answers. So many people that I see, they're like, I just felt like it was hopeless. And for
Mhm.
anyone listening, it's not hopeless. There's a reason for everything you're experiencing, and you're not crazy. And and
Right.
you just have to
Right.
unravel it. And your
Right.
course helps people do that. Now you have these 5 major modules, and then you have bonus modules. So tell us about
Mhm.
those.
So I have two bonus modules. One is about breast implant illness, and I encourage any woman to watch this module or listen to the module, even if you never had breast implants or if you had implants and you had them removed, because I guarantee you have a friend that has them. And it's not a bashing implants. I'm not a, hate all implant type of thing. It's more of raising awareness that implants can be an underlying cause of issues. So it walks you through the whole process of how to rule things out and what are some specific issues that are associated with implants. So, for example, I find a lot of people who've had rupture or who've had migration of silicone have very high metal toxicities. And so it walks you through heavy metal testing. What do you do? What kind of parameters? How to read between the lines, because you'll get missed if you go just by normal ranges. Okay. So I really go in depth on that. And then the second bonus module is cholesterol. And when I was building this course, the developers like, why don't you put that in the regular modules? And I said, no, because people are just going to blow that off thinking, oh, I was told my cholesterol was normal. Well, when 75% of the people in the hospital because of a heart attack have normal cholesterol levels, we're missing something. So
Mhm.
even if you've had normal cholesterol, I want everyone to not only listen to this module, but go get the test that I recommend at least once, because you might actually be able to prevent a stroke or a heart attack. And that's life saving. And it's simple things, it's simple tests to look at. Your insurance will even cover these. You just need to know what to look for and then how to interpret your own cholesterol labs, because I guarantee you, most physicians do not. I've seen cardiologists not even pay attention to these labs. And that's because they're working on the other end. Once, like, oh, well, here, I can stent you, I can have a heart attack. They're not looking at the prevention side. So it's our responsibility to look at our own labs in a prevention standpoint, so that way we can make the changes we need to make to try to prevent all of those things from happening.
No, that's right. This is totally decentralized health. And that is the future because physicians are busy. They're just so busy. And even on the dental end, we're trained in dental school to be excellent carpenters. Excellent. We can
Right.
fix tiny areas. And that's sort of the trend. I mean, procedures are a lot of the trend in medicine. Dr. Miles has an excellent TED talk on breast implant illness. So please watch that. And then we did a deep dive on breast implant illness in episode 89 of, or 87, I think it was, this year. It was January 17th when Dr. Miles and I talked about breast implant illness on Vitality Made Simple. So, there's just so much to learn. You're going to love it. And, when you buy it, I can see people, I know how we are, you tell your friends, the people that are interested, you say, okay, I learned this. Now go get your test. Let's have coffee and talk about, what your test might mean, because this is life-saving information. It just increases vitality, Dr. Miles, because, so much of vitality is peace of mind. When people are not so stressed and in that mode of running from the tiger over everything, like you talked about with adrenal fatigue, then they have more resources to heal. And so I think that's really what you're doing, is freeing up resources. When people find different areas that they can fix, then their body's more ready to heal in other places. So so this course is available right now. It is available until November 13th. And once you buy Functional Labs Decoded, you have access to it forever. You can go totally at your own pace. As I said, I'm through module 4, but I'll be watching it really again and again. I mean, even despite my functional medicine training, just, Laura has a great way of communicating what all of this means. I really do appreciate that, Laura. So she's given a discount code to listeners of the podcast. You can access the course via the show notes or via my website, drdebbieosment.com, and use the code Dr. Debbie, DRDEBBIE, all caps, and that saves what, $100 about? Dr. Miles, yeah.
25%.
Yeah, it's really great. So it's only available until November 13th. If you know Laura Miles, MD, you know that she's always improving on everything. So she's closing it November 13th, reassessing, seeing, what can be added. But the people that buy the class now have access to any additional areas or at a discount. Is that correct?
If I make some changes to the current course, it'll be real time type of things. I have almost 100 pages of handouts in it right now. So I'm already working on another kind of a bonus handout for everyone who's purchased it this time on memory, because it was already requested. So I'm going to be adding that. I'll just kind of sneak it in onto the current course. That's all going to be available for anyone who purchases now.
No, it's so great because it just feels so good to feel good. And I appreciate that you're helping us all, feel good. Even things like something we didn't talk about, but, folks, I'm sure many of you are hearing that you have, the beginnings of fatty liver disease. I had a patient yesterday, in fact, Laura, she said, well, I asked her about her labs and I said, well, your liver enzymes are a little high. And she said, yeah, but my doctor said not to worry about it yet. And, and, so, we talked about that because it's always easier to get, to get rid of the ant problem when there's only one or two ants to squish. So we don't want to let them infest the house. So, so thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. What else can you tell us? Anything else you want to add?
Well, I think the most important thing that I would hope everyone gains out of looking at a course like this is number one is understanding that normal is not optimal. Number two would be that health is personal. And you really have to figure out your risk factors, your symptoms to go a little deeper and not just kind of get brushed aside because you're not crashed. What we're trying to do is prevent you from crashing. Okay. And then the third one is that look deeper. Just because your primary care doctor is finished with looking at the blood work they've ordered, if you're still having symptoms, you need to go deeper. And there are just numerous other tests that you can look at to really start defining what is going on. And then you can actually start addressing those individual issues. So if you're having any kind of symptoms or you've been labeled with an autoimmune condition or chronic fatigue syndrome, or really you just don't feel very good and all your labs are normal, then start looking at the other pathways because you've got something else going on and you need to figure it out now because it will get worse if you don't.
Yeah, we don't like normal here at Vitality Made Simple. I make fun of normal. Normal is what is typical in a society at the time. And right now,
Yeah,
normal in our world is dehydrated, irritated, constipated,
right,
frustrated, overscheduled, overstimulated, undernourished, underrested, and totally stressed out. And we can add to that, normal is spending lots of money on lab tests and not getting any answers on
right,
what those lab tests mean. So you can
right.
change that, folks. Functional Labs Decoded is worth the money, very affordable. It's going to save you money, actually. It already has from me. And just, check it out. It's great. So thanks for joining us, Dr. Laura.
Thank you.
I'm always glad to see you. You're just a dear person in my life. And
Oh, me too.
Vitality.
I love partnering with you.
Oh, thank you. It's fun to work together because we can sleuth out problems, and then people are happy and feel good. It's
Absolutely.
Well, Vitality Made Simple is now in 110 countries and
Wow.
3,111 cities. I looked it up this morning. So thanks for
Wow.
joining me. Thanks for sharing. Join Dr. Miles and I both on Instagram. We're there together, separately, but we're encouraging each other in that area, and it's super fun. Um, tell your friends about Vitality Made Simple, and blessings until next time.